This is an absolutely crazy case. Nimal had been married to his wife Florence for around 12 years. He had been born in Sri Lanka but had moved to England in the 1970s. He had met his wife Florence 12 years previously. She was from Nigeria and had also come over in the 70s for school. The couple had a 12-year-old daughter that they'd named Michelle. Nimal was an aircraft engineer who worked for Bristow's Helicopters in Redhill, Surrey, while his wife Florence was a chief benefits officer for Croydon Council. They had a good lifestyle, a good living in Wallington, Surrey. Their daughter attended a private school and they lived in a nice home. But as the years passed, the relationship between Nimal and Florence started to sour, and there seemed like there was a massive strain on their relationship. One that only they knew about, and they argued frequently. Nimal was very close to his daughter. She also loved spending time with her father, and he would often take her to work with him. They laughed constantly, and Nimal hoped that his daughter would learn something while they bonded together at work. Nimal worked for a helicopter company in Surrey. He was a licensed avionics engineer, maintaining and repairing airborne electronics. He frequently worked evenings and weekends, and Nimal enjoyed spending so much time with his daughter as possible. She was his only child. He had spent several years working abroad, so now he was back in England for good. She was the centre of his world. The night of Wednesday the 22nd of Jan 1992, it was midnight, and the doorbell rang a few times. Of course, everybody was asleep, and at first Nimal woke, hoping it was just kids and that they'd stop soon. But then he got out of bed. He looked out of the window. He couldn't see anybody and got back into bed, but the doorbell continued to ring. So eventually Nimal got out of bed and went downstairs to see what was going on. But when Nimal got to the bottom of the stairs, the door was wide open and a random man was stood in the doorway. He asked if everything was okay and told him he was letting him know that his front door was open. The man explained that he was just a neighbour and was trying to help. Nimal thanked the man and locked the door before calling 999 and reporting the door being open. Police failed to work out why the door was open or find the neighbour that Nimal had described, and there were no obvious signs of forced entry. The door situation made Nimal concerned for his family's safety. He just couldn't shake it off, so he fitted an alarm system at the house and a dummy security camera at the front, just as a deterrent. Now on Thursday the 30th of Jan, that morning it was 6 a.m. and Nimal's alarm went off. He got up and showered ready for the day, planning to drop his daughter off at school on his way to work. That morning his wife was apparently not feeling very well and was still in bed. Now Nimal started getting the car out of the garage, pulling it back and opening the gate. Nimal would usually get the car warm and ready before his daughter would come out, get in, and they would set off together. But that morning, as Nimal's daughter came out of the house, she saw a huddle of people near their garage door. It was strange and certainly not what she was used to seeing on a morning. Hesitantly she approached, noticing legs on the floor and someone laid on the ground. She recognised it was her father. He was not moving and he seemed to be soaked in blood. Police were called to the scene as well as an ambulance, and it was obvious pretty early on that there was nothing that the ambulance crew could do to save Nimal's life. Nimal had been stabbed once in the heart, and after police had cordoned off the area and retrieved as much info as they could, knocking on doors and trying to retrieve video footage, asking anyone if they'd seen anything suspicious that morning, a few witnesses did come forward to say that they'd seen a stocky Indian-looking man inside a white car sat on the road opposite the house around the time that this happened. There did not seem to be any evidence of a struggle or a fight, and it became obvious to police that this had been a paid assassination. But who would want him gone? Of course, Nimal's family, especially his daughter, was inconsolable, and a large reward was offered for information leading to an arrest in this case. The police started to dig into Nimal's life to see who he was involved with. They could see that police had been called to the house on 5 separate occasions. Looking at their system, once had been called by Nimal and several times by Florence. Now, on the first time police had arrived at the house, they'd come to find the couple arguing in the street. On another occasion, police were called to the house and Nimal had a cut on his head. Things seemed to escalate with a third call to police, where they were told by Florence that Nimal had attacked her with a sharp object. Each time, Nimal denied what Florence was saying was true, and police found it difficult to know who to believe, and Florence never wanted to take anything further. When police asked Florence why all of these episodes had arisen previously, she told officers that she'd found out that Nimal was involved in substance trade. She described late-night phone calls, strange people hanging around, and lately Nimal had apparent threats on his life. Police spoke to the couple's daughter, other family members, and close friends, but no one could back up her claims. They did, however, discover that there were divorce proceedings going on through the courts at the time of this case. There was also a huge custody battle over their daughter. The day before this case began, Nimal had sat his daughter down and explained that they were going to split up, and at some point she was going to have to decide where she wanted to live. The daughter had said she wanted to live with her father. Now, in April 1992, police took this case to the BBC Crime Watch programme, where a reconstruction of the crime occurred, hoping to jog someone's memory. It seemed that police knew more at the time than they were letting on, as they spoke of a couple of men that they were interested in speaking to. Police interviewed friends and family members of Nimal and of Florence too, and it's discovered that Florence was in £35,000 in debt. She also stood to gain thousands of pounds from her husband's pension policies and equity on their home. Gain custody of their daughter. It was told that Florence was worried that if her debt problems got out, she would possibly lose her daughter and her home. Now, Florence was seeking full custody of Michelle. She'd apparently wanted to emigrate to Australia. Now, colleagues who worked under Florence described her as never being at work. She apparently arrived in the morning but then would disappear for the rest of the day and hardly spent any time in the office. Now, police discovered that Florence would spend at least 5 hours a day in amusement arcades during the day, and she was also seen in there working, spending at least £1,000 a week on fruit machines in this arcade. And when Nimal discovered the debt, he assumed that Florence was having an affair. Florence explained to officers that she was the Chief Benefits Officer for Croydon Council. They asked for what qualifications she needed for that role, and apparently she showed them. But police found that despite Florence admitting to 7 GCSE O-levels, 5 A-levels, a BA honours degree from Cambridge University, she had not gained any of these qualifications. In fact, she did not have any qualifications, and for some reason Croydon Council had never checked before giving her the position. The court was told that Florence enjoyed the trappings of power. She drove a silver Mercedes, sent her daughter to a fee-paying private school, and spent hundreds of pounds a day on gambling. She frequently spent more than half the day in amusement arcades, making false excuses to her staff to explain where she was. Her addiction to fruit machines and bingo plunged her into £35,000 worth of debt, and she apparently turned to sex work, charging £100 a customer. Now, suspicious about her activities and the possibility that she was having an affair, Nimal had hired a private detective. The private detective worked out that she was working in the sex industry and arranged an appointment with his wife through the escort agency. Police discovered that while Nimal was convinced that his wife was having an affair, he wanted proof that he could use during their divorce and custody case. So he hired a private detective who followed Florence's every move, collecting photos and evidence. The PI not only found that Florence was not at work when she was supposed to be, that she was spending time in amusement arcades. He discovered that to finance her debt and gambling habits, Florence had turned to sex work and was working at an escort agency. As Nimal confronted Florence about his findings, she made up an elaborate lie about her going undercover to catch housing benefit scammers. Now, police knew that murders are most commonly carried out by a relative or someone close to that person, but a contract killing was even more likely to have been organised by a relative or family member. Police did not believe Florence was responsible for actually committing this crime, but they were getting suspicious of her. The amount of strange information police dug up on Florence shone a spotlight on her activities, and after speaking to clients of Florence, police learned that she'd been asking clients if they could or knew someone who could kill her husband. She had gone on to tell differing stories to each of her clients about the ways in which he apparently mistreated her at home. The numbers of people coming forward to say she had asked them if she could do this continued to rise. So before long, just over 4 months after her husband's death, Florence was arrested and charged with murder. But what did they have on her? Well, it was all about to be revealed in court documents, and it wasn't pretty. So Florence was a chief benefits officer at Croydon Council. She had qualifications that she apparently did not possess. It was put to in court that her husband had threatened to expose her double life as a call girl in a bitter divorce battle and custody case. Florence had apparently turned to becoming a call girl in order to finance her £1,000 a week gambling habit and stood to lose everything, and her sex secrets were revealed. Her well-paid job at the council, their daughter's private school education, her reputation, her home, and everything she stood to lose. It was all put to the court that Florence had tried to organise the killing of her husband after he threatened to reveal all in their divorce courts whilst fighting for custody of their 12-year-old daughter. It was put to the court that the only chance Florence had of keeping everything quiet was to take her husband's life. She would then stand to gain $180,000 in her husband's life insurance payout, in turn paying off her debts, keeping her daughter, having enough to emigrate, selling the house and keeping the profits, keeping her reputation intact, and possibly getting a good reference from her old job, hopefully securing a new job abroad. The killer or killers have never been found, but Florence had apparently asked many men if they kill her husband or find someone who could carry out murder. They included Alexander Cheetham, a former chairman of Croydon Community Police Committee, when Florence was introduced to Mr. Cheetham through another call girl who encountered him as one of her clients. Mr. David Calvert-Smith, prosecuting, claimed that Florence had also forged her qualifications in order to land her council job, a £30,000 a year job, by claiming she had 5 A-levels and been to Cambridge University, and wrote her husband's signature on a £5,000 loan application to try and obtain more money. It was also heard that the day after Nimal had died, he had a meeting with social services where Nimal had planned to expose his wife. He had already prepared affidavits showing what Florence was doing behind the scenes, plus other lies. Florence denied any involvement in her husband's murder and suggested it may have been carried out by Tamil Galeras from Sri Lanka. Florence, who was 41, stood to gain thousands from her husband Nimal's pension, policies and equity of their home. But Florence was the only person who was heard in the court to want her husband dead. She was the only one who had reasons to profit from his death. Mr. Calvert-Smith, QC, said that the circumstances of the killing could prove it was assassination. She is a strong-willed and manipulative person, prepared to say and do anything to achieve her own ends. She gave every appearance of respectability and responsibility in her high-powered post. 2-minute tape by the private investigator was played to the court. In the video, Florence could be heard saying, "I'm new in this business this year to pay off some debts. Is there anything you want me to do? Just say so." Florence wore underwear, offering to give the PI a massage. He rejected the sex, and she was seen giving back a portion of the money. Florence said she had made a deal with the madam of the escort agency to go undercover to expose a housing benefit fraud. Now, the defence argued that no large amount of money was taken from the couple's bank account to pay for what prosecution were describing as a contract killing. As witnesses took the stand, it was evidence that Florence had spoken to many people, talking about how she wanted her husband gone. A picture was starting to emerge of Florence and her behaviour prior to his murder. The manager of amusement arcades spoke as a witness at the trial to say that Florence had told him that at home she had been gang raped by her husband and shot at. She even said that she wanted to take a sharp object and stick it in him. She made friends with the manager's girlfriend. She told a similar story, saying that Florence had said to her, "I just want to get rid of him." She made stories at home about how Nimal had tried to interfere with their daughter. She told another co-worker at the council that she wished her husband was dead. Most people said that they never took her stories seriously, and none of Florence's accusations were ever verified. She told a fellow escort that Nimal had given her a substance and then RAPED'd her, then taken photos of it, and she was scared that the photos would be in the newspapers or online. She told another person that she had previously paid someone $10,000 to kill her husband, but it had gone wrong. But a problem with a lot of the witnesses were that they'd not come forward initially in this investigation when it was high profile. They only came forward when they realised that their positions were under threat. Florence slumped forward in the dock and shouted no, as the 8 jurymen and 4 women convicted her of murder and soliciting murder. She was sentenced on the 17th of December to life in prison for the murder and 8 years for soliciting the murder. The judge, Justice Phillips, telling her, "The murder was not committed in the heat of the moment. It was deliberately planned and carried out in cold blood." The Southall Black Sisters organisation criticised the verdict, campaigning for Florence's release, saying that the all-white jury were prejudiced. Her daughter Michelle also campaigned for her release. Their appeals were all unsuccessful. After the trial, police revealed that Nimal had a feeling that his wife was plotting his murder. He had made notes of how he wanted his funeral to go and what music he wanted them to play, and the family honoured these requests, playing the song "Stand By Me" by Your Man. They believed that the housing benefits official from Croydon Council had recruited a hitman to ambush and assassinate her husband, Nimal. Police are still seeking the killer, whose identity still remains a mystery to this day.